Hi everyone, thanks so much for joining us for the talk today. I was going to say, let's give ourselves another round of applause as well, because we made it in despite apparently the biggest industrial action for 30 years. Tudor Rosebank. So yeah, genuinely thank you all so much for being here. I was posting on LinkedIn this morning as well to say, thanks to Jamie and the wider team at JH for really putting this talk at the start of the day and at the start of the technical track. Hopefully it reflects how everyone feels about gender equality and how important it is that we do have these conversations and talk about how we can bridge the gender gap together. So I'm going to start off with some good news, but there will be caveats. So I was reading an article saying that looking at FTSE 100 CEOs, 10 years ago, about 12.5% of those CEOs were female. The Department of Business published in February this year that number is now up to 40%, which is pretty good increase. But the two caveats being FTSE 100 is a pretty limited group of companies, literally 100 businesses, so they're not necessarily representative of the wider industry. And the fact still stands that only 19% of roles in tech are fulfilled by women today. So hopefully all the more reason for us to get together and have this conversation today. So what are we going to talk about? So we're going to talk about recruitment. How do we employ and attract more women into tech roles, especially if you're in a position, if you're a hiring manager, you might get some useful takeaways today. We're going to talk about progression as well. This is something that is really highlighted by the gender pay gap reports, which have been published as of 2021, which kind of highlight that even the women that are being attracted into the tech industry aren't necessarily progressing through as much as we'd like to see. We're going to also talk about flexibility and post-pandemic working, and is it a good thing? It sounds great, but again, there's some gotchas there as well, that especially if you're working with women and other gender minorities are worthwhile bearing in mind in your day-to-day. And along the way, we're going to really hopefully have a pretty practical conversation, and hopefully everyone will come away with some practical takeaways. So, as I mentioned, 19% of roles are fulfilled by women in our industry today. What could, let's start very broad. What could companies be doing better in terms of attracting a more diverse workforce? I know, Abby, you work for Transmission PR. Sorry?
Yeah. So I'm coming at this sort of beyond the binary. So I run a communications consultancy which specialises in transgender and non-binary inclusion and awareness. So, from my perspective, it's even more broad than just women, 51% of the population, something like that, aren't we? And it's just about kind of everybody knows that the more diverse a company is, the better the products will be, the broader the range of people your products will appeal to. So kind of extending that out even beyond women, I think is really, really important to make sure that all gender minorities are kind of part of that picture. Can't remember what the question was.
What could companies be doing better in terms of attracting a more diverse workforce? Not just women, but especially, I guess, in your field.
So from a company perspective, it's all about really leaning in to representation and showing that you are supportive of different groups. So if you can kind of bake it into your policies and make sure that it's sort of super clear that you are visibly supportive of gender minorities and women, I think that's a really good way to start, having important conversations and being seen to have those conversations, because unfortunately, if you're not seen to be having the conversations, then by default, it looks like you either aren't really interested or worse, you don't really care.
Yeah, so when we're thinking about attracting women and gender minorities, I know, Alice, you recently returned to Fisheye Media, I think, having worked there as an intern. Would you be able to tell us a bit more about how you why did you want to become a developer and what attracted you to Fisheye Media?
convenience. They were 20 minutes away from my house. But I stayed because everyone was really nice. So I was working as an intern, worked on Magento 1. I went to university, came back and was a technical account manager, and I thought, actually, this really isn't for me. So March of this year, I became a full-time Magento developer. And I think just because everybody's so nice where I work with, that's why I wanted to stay. It's about the progression for me. I know that I want a career to be a Magento developer and be a know-it-all in Magento, and they've really helped my career progression, and they've all been so supportive. It's making sure that I know that I have the resources there and that they'll help me with my exams. They've paid for my exams. They paid for all the Swift Autumn material, which I've been following closely. And it's not just stopping at one exam. I can continuously do that. And with this merger with UE now, so they've brought our company, I think that having the sort of definitive roles within the company, so junior, media, senior and lead, and what you have to do to be able to progress those roles is really helping, and having the pay bands associated with them as well, it just shows how you can progress and how you can get there. You're not just stuck as just a developer almost, which is, I think, great for where I want to be going.
Do you remember the first time that you remember thinking or becoming aware of coding and development as a role and as a career option?
So I built computers when I was younger with my friends because everyone was sort of playing Call of Duty, and I was like, oh, I'll tag along with you guys, thanks. No, I wanted to do web design when I was younger, and then I sort of looked at development because I was like, oh, that'll make me look smart, because I've always been really dumb, so I was like, yeah, that'll make me look smart. So did that, and yeah, that was about when I was 16, I went to college, and one of the tutors, I was like, are you sure you want to be doing this? It's just mainly guys here. And I was the only female there. And I was like, yeah, screw you, I will. I will do it, thank you very much. Ever since then, I've not really had any sort of issues with anybody. Just sort of know that I've wanted to do it and stuck at it. And I think that's an important thing. Just don't care what anyone else thinks, as long as you're happy in what you're doing. That's the most important thing.
Amazing. And I guess recruitment aside, and there's lots of things that we can no doubt talk about how companies can look at writing job descriptions in a way that doesn't maybe put women or gender minorities off from applying, making sure that in your recruitment process or even in your interview processes that you show that you have a representative workforce, so people feel included and as if they're going to step into a workplace that is inclusive and that they're going to be comfortable in. Besides all of those things that companies can do, there's potentially a problem earlier on in the process when we're looking at schooling and education. I feel like, Sarah, you might have a thing or two to say on the subject.
Yeah, I think obviously a big part of the issue that we're facing and that we don't have a balanced workforce is that we do not have girls choosing STEM subjects at school. So I think because we are part of that community, we need to, as individuals and corporates, we need to engage with not only our potential pool of recruits, not only our local universities, but also be engaging with schools and young girls to encourage them to, choose maths at school, do computer science at school. I remember my mum, who worked in tech, who was, at that time, it was very unusual.
You had an example.
Telling me to do computing GCSE. And I was like, no, I don't want to do it. And I really should have done computing GCSE. So, yeah, we should all be encouraging and building those community connections with our local schools.
One of the things that we do at Dot Digital that we started talking about is, diversity in general. And I think one of the things that I find is, especially when we're thinking about, International Women's Day and other things like that, they're great opportunities in the calendar year to start, to throw light on, some of these issues and challenges that we're trying to overcome. But ideally, you want to be working this into your day-to-day, and you want diversity to become more of a strategic subject that's worked into your business's plans and your hiring strategy. And so at Dot Digital we have what we call it's called Dot DEI. Everything at Dot Digital starts with Dot, by the way. But yeah, the Dot DEI group, and they look after everything diversity, equality, and inclusion. And it's a sort of, well, it's a committee of people that have put themselves forward, who come together regularly, that think about what can we do proactively, which is really great to see. Would you say in your businesses, and I appreciate, Abby, you've got a lot of control in this, being the founder of your business, but maybe a question for Sarah and Alice. Would you say in your businesses enough conversation happens on an ongoing basis when it comes to the topic of diversity and equality? Or what are maybe even some of the good things that you've seen people do?
Yes, I think, well, I'm very lucky because I'm a non-exec director, so I can pick and choose. I'm very, very picky about the businesses I work with, and if D&I was not on the agenda of those businesses, I probably would, it's nice for me to be able to work in businesses where that is always on the agenda. We can always talk more about it, I suppose, but I think if you mentioned something like International Women's Day, people often say to me, what are you doing for International Women's Day? And I say, I'm working, because I work 222 days of the year, and I think it's not always useful to peg campaigns on particular days or months of the year. We have to set policies in place and particularly look at how we recruit across the whole of the year, and those things need to be ongoing, long-term strategic initiatives rather than short-term campaign-focused initiatives.
We were just 30 people, so we haven't really got a lot going on. We don't do much for women at work, to be honest, but that's sort of expected because we're such a small company. If we did take that time, it's like nothing much would get done, but hopefully now with the acquisition, merging with you, hopefully there is more that they can be done, and that I know that they celebrated International Women's Day. But it's just such a nice environment to work in. You don't ever feel like a minority or an outsider anyway. So just that ongoing conversation of how is everybody doing as an individual basis is what we have. And having coffee calls which include everybody, I think is really nice. Just have check-ins with everyone. Yeah.
I think that's the key thing. It's about making sure that whatever diversity and inclusion you have is something that happens throughout the year. It's part of your strategy. It leans into your values, and it kind of, I hate the phrase, but it's walking the talk, isn't it? It's doing as you, demonstrating that you actually do support these groups, that you actually do want to proactively recruit and have diversity in your workforce. I don't think it's rocket science. That's the beauty of it. But you can't just assume that people will just come to you. You have to kind of proactively go out and say, right, okay, well, this is what we stand for. This is the kind of representation we want. And then you have to do something about it, whether that's putting out campaigns, it's really obvious stuff like making sure your photography is representative of different minority groups. Something as simple like that as that can, in an instant, demonstrate that you have that kind of, even if it may not reflect your current workforce, that's your intention. And it's about making those kind of inclusive steps and showing that you support LGBT plus groups or women, not just during Pride, which happens to be June, but throughout the whole year. It's about partnering up with charities and making sure that you're doing things to proactively support those groups 12 months of the year.
Yeah, we were talking the other day about blind recruitment practices. It'd be interesting to hear your perspective, Abby, on whether that's a good idea, and what, if so, what are the pros or cons around that?
So it's really interesting. If you look at the research, it suggests that people who transition, so if you are born female and transition to male, or if you are born male and transition to female, your experience is in line with the gender that you transition to. So, for example, if you're a trans woman, so you were born a male, and you just change your name on your CV, you actually have less chances of being employed, even though you have exactly the same CV that you had before, just with a different name. And trans men, so born female and then transitioning to male, find that they have a better strike rate in terms of getting interviews because their name has changed to a male name. So I think, I think blind recruitment is a really, really good idea. Just take the name off altogether and let the experience and ability speak for itself.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And moving on to maybe a slightly different topic. So I sort of alluded to this when we started the conversation, but yeah, sort of working in, and I say this somewhat optimistically, a post-pandemic world. I know COVID is still here, but hopefully we can say we're in the post-pandemic phase. And it's, it's touted to give us all a lot of flexibility in terms of being able to choose where we work. I know that at Dot Digital, the way we do it is team dependent. So some teams will work fully remote, some teams will work hybrid. It really depends on your role type. But we do still have offices for people that want to travel in or want to work together sort of creatively. And that all sounds great if that's your reality. But I think I've also heard murmurs along the way of people saying, especially where you've got someone who at home is the primary caregiver when it comes to children, actually the increased time you spend at home, you end up juggling more things, and it doesn't always work out to be a benefit because now you're just trying to manage home life and work in one and the same space. So I don't know, really, have you guys heard something similar?
I think that's definitely true of some people's experience.
Yeah.
And I think from a core business perspective, I think the answer partly is just to really, really understand your staff and their lived daily experience, and provide as much as you can for those people. So some people still are having to kind of get up and move from their bed to a tiny desk next to their bed and work there. And if you're not providing them with some sort of office space to go to some of the time, that's their lived experience every day. I have 2 kids. Some days it's very, very busy and noisy in my house, and it would be quite, it's quite nice to get out of the house. So I think it's just really, really understanding your staff and their needs and trying to adapt to their needs.
Yeah.
Alice, you've got interesting experience there.
I worked from home for the first year of the pandemic. Luckily, Fisheye did actually open the office. I think it was me, Robin, Seth, all there, the great trio. But when I was working at home, I didn't have a desk because I live at home with my parents. So luckily, I did manage to get one. My partner built me one in the shed, and Damien dropped off a chair for me. So I did have a desk in the end, but other than that, I was working in my bed. So just like this all day, trying to code, and then I'll be up till 12 because I like to make sure I get things done. And that was a time where I was being an account manager, and I was like, oh, I secretly want to do a bit of code at night as well. So I do that, and then I sort of get up at 7 again and then repeat. And I didn't shower for 5 days once. It was disgusting. Just because I was so engrossed. And I think that working from home, they didn't have that balance of being able to go into the office and sort of separate your work life from your home life, and it's difficult. And even when I do find myself working at home Monday and Friday now, I'm having to make sure that I can cater for my family and that the house is clean and everything before they get back, and that they have dinner ready, make sure that I pick up my partner from work. And it's sort of the same with other females as well. I've seen a recent study, I'm not even going to pretend to pronounce the company name, but they did a survey with 400 women, and 83% of them felt like they, since the pandemic, that their work life has sort of gone downwards because of having to be the primary caregiver in their home, having to make sure that they still have that progression at work because they feel like they are losing out on progression or having to make up the hours and feel like they've got extra workload. And I think because you're at home, it's like so easy, just go, I'll just go do this washing up or something, make sure it's all right, and then you've got to make up the work later. So I think that's really difficult, trying to make that balance. So it's good to make sure that you are allowing people into the office in a safe environment so that people can get away from it.
Yeah, and I think something that I've done with my team is, especially since, during the pandemic when we were all remote, and even now when we're still sort of very much hybrid, sort of I tend to go into the office 1-2 days a week. I make sure that I sort of just really briefly check in with them, sort of, 3 days a week. Some people find that overkill, but we just do what feels right to us. So it might be just like 5-10 minutes on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, find out if there are any blockers. And even if you're doing this you're having this conversation virtually, you can build a relationship with people remotely. So I think what you've just said there as well just highlights the need to just have that conversation. Don't assume that flexibility and remote working is good and fine for everyone, and just try to understand how that, what other factors in their home lives might be impacting how they feel at work. Just keeping the communication lines open really.
And the only thing I'd add on the flip side is that for gender minorities specifically, tech's got a really amazing opportunity to kind of really own this whole kind of, allowing people, the remote element provides a certain amount of anonymity, and if people don't want to be visible, tech really sort of lends itself to that. And also the fact that it's so quantifiable in terms of some output. That's also a really brilliant thing for people who are remote working or who are having to juggle work life, and they've got kids and maybe they have to stop to make tea, but they can jump back on later and do a bit more. I just think that that's a real positive.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah, absolutely. And extending that again, the 4-day work week is something that we're hearing about lots. And when I heard that we were potentially going to be trialling it, I got very, very excited. What are your thoughts on it? Maybe.
4-day work week. I've been working 24/7 for as long as I can remember. No, I think that people. Flexible working, work around everything else. It should be a balance. It should be about work life, definitely.
Very nice. I think we also want to leave maybe a little bit of time for some questions. So if you do have any questions, maybe give it, or think about it for a minute. And I'm just going to go around the panel here for maybe some really quick takeaways, or if you had one recommendation for people in the room, what would it be?
Mine would be to make the most of the communities that are available to us. So if you, obviously a lot of us are from outside of London, if you have a quick look on Meetup, there are tons and tons of women in tech groups. There are there's groups for every single person in Meet Magento today. So have a look and find your people, find your group, and then advocate for your business within that group. That would be my tip.
So I did a little survey for women before I came and just asked them what they wanted me to say. So basically, do better than the government standard for the maternity leave. You only get 6 weeks, like 90%, and then it just goes all downhill from there. There are companies which are doing better, like sort of Vodafone, where it's 16 weeks at 90% pay. Try and offer that. That's going to make women want to apply for your company and stay there. Also offering help with childcare and look into returnships. So those are courses where it's 10 weeks to 6 months, making sure that when you've had like a break from work or maternity leave, when you come back, just getting those skills back and making sure, so if I was doing development, that I'm up to date with the new technologies. And I think that's really important to do.
Mine would just be, if you want access to the widest pool of talent possible, show that you want these people and do things to demonstrate it.
Yeah, and do the work on an ongoing basis. Lovely. Do we have time for a quick couple of questions?
Don't be shy.
Any questions in the room? if you've got any later on, I think the four of us at least will be around until midday as well. So do feel free to come and grab us during a break or at lunch, and we'll be happy to have a chat.